Okay, so this longer video we'll strive to answer the bigger question of have energy markets in Europe bottomed? And the key thing here is really what to look out for. This chart is TTF, the main European gas contract front month. And I've just highlighted here that really we want this idea of the higher high. 31.22 was the level we saw back at the beginning of February, and this lower 22.32. So this range is really what we've got to watch at the moment, and it's just too early to say on this medium-term daily chart whether we bottomed or not, but we're going to try and answer the question. And the key thing is what we need to look out for in terms of the market. So we're going to do a longer detailed session, and hopefully if you're trading energy, and especially if you're a buyer of energy procurement, I'm going to talk to you a bit about forward pricing and things about that as well. So the key thing is to remember your time horizon, and that's really the point. If you're asking me, have energy markets bottomed? The first question I'm going to say is, what's your time horizon? Because if your time horizon is short term, days, maybe even a few weeks now, the answer is yes, they have bottomed, but medium term, still too early to say, and long term, they clearly haven't. And we'll look at the time frames, and when I produce the reports, that's really what I'm doing. But it all depends on your time horizon. Now, the techniques I'm using, I use mainly two different types of charts. I use the cloud charts, which I'll explain as we go forward, and the point and figure charts, but I've adapted those with the targets. So this is the point and figure charts. A lot of people don't want to use point and figure because they just find it too complicated and too hard to understand. And there are some downsides of point and figure as well. There's no time in the chart. So basically, and these charts, you have to remember, were invented back in the 1940s. So this is not something new. These price targets that I've been talking about have just been adapted to fit on line-based charts. So there's nothing new about them. It was just a technique developed well over 100 years ago to take noise out of the market. Now, the main drawbacks were that they're hard to get the hang of. You've got no idea when a target might be reached, and it's hard to know when a target is failing. And that's something we've tried to address with these new targets. And so basically, we've just taken the point and figure targets and we've introduced them into line charts. And it's all about this initial thrust. That's what generates the targets. It's all automated. So when we look at the targets today, this is where they've derived from, and it's just this the amount of target and the time to target is the new aspect, and the same with downside targets as well. So, and we do talk a little bit about things like the target is negated, it's activated, it's failing, and so when I talk that language, if you want to pause the videos on these slides, just helps you understand how. And this is what their targets look like. A negated target is grey. That's been negated because we've moved below the level where the thrust was given. Targets are achieved are not in bold anymore, and the bold ones are the ones that are in trade. And orange targets are unactivated targets. They're waiting for activation. So you'll see these today when we look at the examples. And clustering is where the targets all meet, or the time and the price is all in the same sort of zone. So that's really powerful. And we have this idea of how far do you want to look back as well. So you'll notice that as I'm about to start looking at the charts, I look back further on the daily data, and I look back less far on the 60-minute data, and further on the weekly data. So that clearly makes sense. So without further ado, we're just going to go straight to the charts. Now, what I want to do is I want to start with Brent Crude. It's the major thing within the energy mix. And what's happening with Brent Crude right now, if we look at this 60-minute chart, we are waiting for this upside target to activate. This is a 0.5% unit size. It's similar to a 0.5% box size, but it's now a unit size because we don't have boxes anymore. We're not on a point and figure chart. So it's 0.5% unit that decides the thrust element. And if you want to know more about these, there's longer videos. Just message me, and I'm more than happy to provide you with links to the longer videos, and you'll find them adjacent to this video on the uploaded website. So look there. But you can see here, I'm just showing the last 8 targets. I could show more targets, but and then I'm using a unit of 0.5%, and the target price factor is 2 times. You can vary that factor as well if you wanted. But the most important thing is I'm using just a slope where I'm saying the time to target is half. Now that might be a little bit aggressive here, and you can change that if you're trading something, you might want to do that to fit the data. And when we go to look at gas and power, we will look at that. So the interesting thing is we're waiting for this upside target to activate. That will activate at around 84. And so we're going to move above 84, a close on the daily above this activation level. Remember, we've got to go that little bit extra to activate, which is why we've got these little tracks here. That's where the target was given. That's the initial thrust move, and then we pulled back, which is what we want to see. That locked the thrust move, and then we've now got this. We've got to go a bit beyond the thrust to actually activate that. And that level, if I hover over it, is 83.80. Let's say we need to close above 84, and we'll activate that. And similarly, on the 60-minute chart on Brent Crude, we need to move above. That was the thrust there that's given this new upside target to 88.50. We need to activate that. Now, if you want a heads up as to whether you're going to get activation or not, and again, we can do this on gas and power charts, is you want to watch this chart. So this is the 10-minute chart and then the 1-minute chart. And so we can see here that 83.73 is the target at the moment. We haven't really broken out of this range, not enough to activate. Just going to the really long term, if we break above the cloud and we get into that 100 area, if we break above this level at 95, we activate a new upside target there. So we have got some very big upside targets for crude oil on the weekly, but let's not think about those for the moment. So the key thing is on crude, we're waiting for that move really through 84, 84.50, and then it will all start to look like upside for crude oil. So really quite key there. Just to give you that analysis on crude oil. And of course, that may well have an impact on the whole energy mix. So crude oil through 84, all the news you're seeing on OPEC and what's happening in the Middle East, you can forget all of that. All right, you might get a trigger from the news, but the reality is 84 is the level that we need to see on Brent Crude. And you can go similarly on WTI, of course. Here, you've got, I've just looked quickly at WTI. We're waiting for this target to activate above 81, let's say. So it's a similar picture. We don't have that on the daily, but we're just waiting for that on the 60-minute. Now, looking at US nat gas, this has been very interesting. We had some very big downside targets on nat gas, but we've now got upside targets. So like European gas, we're seeing these targets come into play, and that's looking really quite key there. Now, I could go and put loads more targets on. Let's say if I go and put, say, 30 targets on, you're going to see all those downside targets that were there previously, and then those targets there. Now, the targets take a little bit of calculation, so I'm going to stick with 8 targets there, just so we've got that on the chart. But that's the picture right now. So US gas is starting to look pretty bullish. And if I actually zoom in on that chart, let's hit the ZK. We can see here these thrust moves have been producing the upside target. So you want to watch those. That then, of course, means what happens if I look at the 10-minute chart, good upside targets there. The 1-minute chart, big upside targets here, waiting right now for one of these to activate, and this will probably happen during this session. So I'll come back and I'll look at this 1-minute chart for US nat gas, which one's going to win. Now, I would favor, based on the 60-minute chart being bullish above the cloud and those upside targets, and the 10-minute chart, although I do have a little downside one here as well, I would favor the upside winning. But you can never be sure. You've got to watch the targets play out. We might get a counter trend move. We might be in a range. But the key thing is a move above 195 would activate to 197. And these are the targets in train at the moment. One's been met already. That was off that first thrust. But another thrust here, that one hasn't been met yet. Actually, that's the little mini thrust that's generated that. There's a little arrow under there. But just waiting to see which one of those wins. So you could do the same on any chart, of course, but that's the 1-minute chart. And that's the 10-minute chart. So that's the picture for gas on the 60-minute chart. So we've just established that. Just a quick look at coal, because I know I've got some coal traders amongst my clients. The picture for coal has been really clearly, the downside targets have been really in train on the daily. We are just moving through the cloud on price. Now, cloud, remember, if you're below the cloud, you're bearish. If you're above the cloud, you're bullish. That's the simplicity of it. There is a bit more to it. If you want to understand cloud charts, my book, Cloud Charts, is available on Amazon, and that will help you understand cloud charts. And there's a lot of other market analysis in there as well. So that's what's really happening on the clouds. We're above the cloud. Notice how this upside target on the 60-minute chart was given and then met. Now, the liquidity here in coal, this is the ICE contract. If you've got OTC data and you're running up data on Trayport, then you'll have better visibility on your coal data. This is it running here. I'm running on Refinitiv Icon. Remember that you can run up data on dozens of different data services. There's literally dozens of them. You just tick in the ones you've got. Could be Bloomberg. I'm running on Refinitiv Icon, and there's lots of different services there that you can run on. Now, the interesting thing is that little upside target was given on the 60-minute and then met. So we are through the cloud there on the 60-minute chart, and we're just moving through on the price, but not yet on the lagging line on the daily chart. And there's a shortage of upside targets. So if you said to me, you know, what's happening with coal, and you'll notice it's not very liquid here because of the data I've got. If you've got OTC data, then you've probably got a better picture on coal. Do have a target to 111 based on that data that I've got. This one to 108 was met. You'll notice how they were met quicker. Again, I could adjust these targets to fit the data if I wanted. But the key thing is we have got a target there of 112.80 and we got to 110. So we might push a little bit further, but the problem is the granularity of the data. Again, you want to be doing it on your OTC data. And we've got a lot of coal traders doing that. More and more people are using these targets every day. It's a very exciting thing for me, having worked for 40 years really, to then deliver these targets. And the key thing is we are looking really interesting there. So coal. Now carbon. Now a lot of carbon traders, and I get a lot of questions on carbon. So first of all, I'm going to look at the European emissions contract. I'm going to start with the daily. I could look at the weekly, but realistically, we are below the cloud. This upside target was met. We've got a downside target of 40.51 on the weekly, but at the moment, I'm really not in that frame of mind. I'm just looking what's happening on the daily. And the picture is similar as per most energy markets in that we've got this upside target and the downside target. And which one do you believe? Now, there's a level here at 80. There's a little mini level here at 65. I notice how these downside targets are all given and met. And this one, I could look at this target now and I could probably say maybe that 44.72 has done its job. It was in train. We've started wandering away from the target. So I'm now really not attaching a lot of importance to this downside target on the daily because I've wandered away from it. This is the beauty of having that trajectory. I've wandered away. The targets are pointing down, and now I'm wandering sideways. I'm moving away from the target. So I'm starting to, and then I've got a new target in train. I'm starting to ignore this target. So when we were up at 65, the target was 44.72. We only got to really 51, and now we're wandering away from the target. So I place less credence on that target. And you might say to me, well, you know, that wasn't very good, was it? But then if you were watching the 60-minute chart, you would have noticed lots of new upside targets coming in. And that's the key why you want to watch the time frames. If you're seeing those targets. So on emissions, it's too early to say that we've bottomed on this daily chart, but it's looking really potentially like we've reached a nadir, and now we're going for upside targets. And if we look at the 60-minute chart, again here we see this last downside target that was given at 57 to 52. That was given and met, a little mini one there, and then we start to see the upside targets kicking in, and at the same time we cross the cloud. Now when we cross the cloud, that puts us into a more bullish frame of mind. Now this target was really difficult because it was given and then we pulled away from it. It's still valid, but the reality is we're really waiting for new targets, and you may not always get a target. This has just been marching steadily up the hill on the 60-minute chart. It's bullish above the cloud. Making that new high there is really significant as well, above that 50 59 level, 58, 90, 59 level. Breaking there is really quite key. And psychologically, we're through 60 this morning, and that's quite strong as well. And if we look at the 10-minute chart now, this is where the picture gets a little bit more interesting. And that's how you basically, if you're looking at carbon, you want to be thinking about that. And you can see here these upside targets really quite key. So that's what you want to be watching. And then if we look at the 1-minute targets on carbon, again, we had these targets this morning. This was yesterday. Upside targets yesterday kicking in, and then another target this morning. We went out in the report this morning as bullish because we had these upside targets, and then new targets developing through the day. 62 is the level currently, and these ones have already been met. So really quite interesting there that we're seeing that on the 1-minute chart and the 10-minute chart. So for today, it looks like it's still got higher to go. So that's the call. If you said to me, have we bottomed on the carbon market? It's looking like we may well have done so. But don't forget, when we saw the daily charts, we saw this big move here. Look at that move. We moved from 65 to 80. We moved 15 euros in December before hitting the top of the cloud and falling away again for another thrust down and another whack. So we can't ignore the fact that when we get to around high 60s and we hit the cloud, we may see the same thing happen again. But for now, there's a short-term opportunity into the high 70s showing itself there on the daily chart and on the 60-minute chart. Not so clear. We probably will get a pullback and a new thrust. We just moved higher there on carbon, 61 now touching, so really quite key, moving all the way to these targets, 64 and 66, and on the 1-minute chart, 62.16. That's looking like it's going to happen. So really quite interesting there, watching those very short-term charts. The UK carbon contract. So we can do the same process, and this is really nice actually because I've got some unactivated targets. Now the UK carbon contract wasn't very liquid at all last year, but suddenly it's become liquid in the last few months. This is the ICE contract, and you'll see we've got these downside targets, really disconcerting here. We had downside targets to 21 and 17. We got as low as 31, but you'll notice here we've got these new upside targets waiting for activation. Now the first one is about to activate at about 37, and the second one will activate at about 38.70. So those targets are looking quite key, and that's really interesting. And we've got this target here taking us back to the top of the range. So a very different looking chart on the 60-minute chart here. We've got a downside target. We moved away from the downside target. We're not really focused on that one now. We're looking to this one, to 37.84, 3% higher, back to that resistance level. Of course, if we smash that, that's going to be key. And then you could, of course, look at the 10-minute. Got 1 to 39 there this morning. That was given yesterday, in fact. And so really quite key. It's actually been activated this morning, and if we look at the 1-minute chart, they're not really clearly any thrust. There were thrusts yesterday and they've been met today. So that just shows you the power of looking at the different chart types. I don't bother with candles on the 1 and 10-minute charts because my view is that you're literally moving through to the next minute and there's no gaps because you've just gone from 1 minute to the next. The 60-minute I do use them. It's just visually it helps you see each hour. So that is what's happening with carbon markets. Now gas is really interesting. We're looking at European gas. First of all, we're going to look at TTF, remembering this data could be coming from Trayport or Bloomberg or lots of different data feeds. I'm running on now LSEG, was Refinitiv, Icon. That's what I'm using mostly. I do have data coming in here from Montel as well, so I could use Montel. The choice is yours. There's several different data sources that you could be running European products on. So what's interesting here is TTF. So if we look at the 60-minute chart, sorry, the daily chart, and I zoom in on that, it's really quite interesting here that we've got this really big downward move. But if we go in and zoom in on the candles, what do we see? So first of all, we're below the cloud. Remembering I talked about those key levels previously. There's the level 31.22, 22.32. That's really the key levels that we need to watch for the break. And for the moment, We've got this downside target, but we're really moving right away from it. This happened right at the sort of nadir for gas, down to sort of 1470 euros. And don't forget, we did see these recovery moves back in October, and then we pulled away again. If I just look at that as a comparison, we went all the way up through the cloud before then falling back to these levels. It does look reasonable that there is a support level, and I can actually undo those trend lines, and I could actually just take those off the chart. Let's just clear those for now, and go and put them on the longer term. The longer term level is here, and so that's the low. And it's really very interesting that that low back in June 22 and 22, that may well be a low point, and 56 was a high point. So you can't ignore that, in that there is clear support around 22. So that's also really interesting. And if you look at the weekly chart, not many people are going to look at weekly data, but it is interesting all the same. And we have seen some weekly candles starting to improve there on TTF. So that's also really quite powerful indeed. So the interesting thing here is we've got this upside target to 31. That's 10% higher, but we are still below the cloud. What I have to do is then go to the 60-minute chart, and this is really where all the action is right now. And again, I'm going to put more targets on here. I'm going to go to, say, 30 targets just for now. The targets take a bit more time to calculate if I've got all those targets there, but it just shows that downside targets, upside targets, downside targets, and then here we start to see the upside targets kicking in. So really quite interesting there. I'm going to go back and just keep it to what we've got going on right now. I'm going to zoom in on this data. So you'll notice on the 23rd of February, we had a thrust. That first move was the buying thrust. These round dots are where the target is activated. So that's the point at which your target is activated. And that target was given at 23.50, and it was given to 25.60. Took about 2 days to get there. That's what the angle said it would do, and it was met on the 28th. So it took 5 days to get there. And then we had another thrust in the meantime from 27 on the 27th, just happened in that day where we had those moves, and that was activated on the morning of the 28th, and that was given at 24.50 to 27.50, so a €3 move, and that did take longer. So we had to wait through the weekend. It happened yesterday, so really quite key there. And another one that was given on the 29th, activated on Friday, and it wasn't as big, but more upside targets is telling you I'm getting multiple buying thrusts. They're buying thrusts, they're kicking in all the time, and so that's what we're seeing there on the train track. So, and then this really big upside target, really quite interesting there, that we're seeing that 30.98, so €31. We're sitting at 27, at 28 at the moment. And of course, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the 10-minute charts. So the 10-minute chart, I've got a target there that's just been activated today, this morning, to 30.28. And notice that target, 30.28, 30.98. So I've got targets pointing into that area. It's what we call clustering. So you really are seeing those targets starting to kick in. The 1 minute chart, we're waiting really for pullbacks. Notice how we had the pullback yesterday afternoon, downside target was given. That was then met, and then we started from that set us up for the next thrust moves. But these moves are not very big. We're going through a transition potentially, and there's a lot of uncertainty between the traders. But for the moment, we are seeing those upside targets. So, that is really quite interesting, looking at the 1 minute and the 10 minute. Now, we could do the same thing, of course, for the summer contract. You can see there, that's looking really very bullish as well. No big surprises there. You go to the year. This data's coming off ICE. Big jumps there on the yearly contract. And then, of course, we could go to MBP. If we're trading UK gas, you can do exactly the same process. We've got this upside target there on MBP. We're pushing towards that. Very similar picture to TTF. No big surprises there. Go on to the 10-minute chart. There you are on MBP on the 10-minute, and on the 1 minute. And of course, we called this morning in our morning call report. We called all the gas products bullish this morning. So again, no big surprises there. European gas products, and if I look at summer gas in UK, that's quite key as well. Now, just while I'm on gas, I'm going to just talk a little bit. If you're a buyer of gas, if you're in procurement, and you're thinking about buying forward, well, what do you do? So this shows you a chart of TTF, and these are all the forward curves. These curves coming from OTC Global Holdings, which Update is compatible with, and it just shows you the power of how the curve is not actually moving that much. Now, really big problem if you were buying gas up in this territory forward, because you were having to pay big. And if I put the curves on, you'll see that you had to pay a lot of money into the future, and that was a real problem. But now we're at these levels, back to the levels roughly that we saw pre the Russia-Ukraine breakout of war. It's interesting to see these forward prices. And don't forget, this is not a predictor of where the price will be. It's just what people are prepared to pay for the future now. So when should you be buying forward is the question. And the answer to that question is, what's your time horizon? But if you are looking to buy forward on gas, then you want to be thinking, the key thing here is you want to be thinking where are we going to see the change? And certainly above 30 euros on TTF. The interesting thing about seeing that on TTF, 30 euros, that's quite key. So the interesting thing about this market in terms of energy trading is, if you're a seller of energy, then you want to be selling forward in a downtrend. If you're a buyer of energy, you do not want to be buying forward in a downtrend. But if we move into an upward trending market, if you're a seller of energy, you can sell it for more later on. And if you're a buyer of energy, it's going to cost you more later on. So the trend is your friend when you're thinking about buying or selling long term. And that's a really important point to make. And I know a lot of my followers, I've got 32,000 followers on LinkedIn. I know a lot of my followers are buyers of energy. And if you're thinking about when should I buy energy, that's what you want to be watching. It's 30 euros on TTF. Above that level, we're going to be in a trending market. We're moving higher on the daily, and that's going to be really quite significant. Having said that, we did that before in July, and people might have been pushed into buying forward, and then we went lower. This 22 level is pretty key. If we get back to that level, that's going to be really quite interesting. And then on NBP, that level is at the moment it's around 75, and we're not a long way from that. So you could be forgiven for buying at these levels, thinking that maybe this is the beginning of a bottom. So that's quite key. Now, last of all, we're going to look at power markets, and so German power. Now, the interesting thing about German power is that we did have these downside targets. Really, that one was given back in December 22, said to 45. We didn't get to 45. And it took a lot longer, but we were then at 200 euros. And so a call to 45 when we were at 200 euros was pretty ballsy, but that's what the target said. And then if we look at that now, we just say, well, that target is, forget about it. It's history. But notice how all these downside targets were given and met. You had one given here at 130 in September to 110, 109. We nearly got there. Another one that was given in November, and we nearly got there. And then another one that was given, we nearly got there. Now we've got an upside target, but big but, we are below the cloud. So the key thing is that this is a counter trend target to 92. Says to me that we probably or may not get there, because it is a counter trend move, and the targets are quite often not met when they're counter trend. So you need to be aware of that. But we do have this spectacular thing going on here on the 60-minute chart. Sadly, we're not getting thrusts. Now, if I changed my unit size, we probably would get thrusts, and I could do that. But what I'm going to do straight away is I'm going to go to the 10-minute on German power, and you can see here, not so clear there. And then we go to the 1-minute chart, and we do have these really clear targets. So if you're trading power, and this is on EEX data, if you're trading on IHC data, you'll have more granularity in your data if you're looking it up to Trayport, and then you'll see these targets. But there's no denying it's looking pretty bullish on today on the very short-term chart, which is why we called it bullish today. On the 1-minute chart, the 10-minute chart is less clear. You've got to look around for the targets, basically. And if we look at the quarterly, we've got a big jump there in the price as well. Got targets there on the quarterly, and if you're looking at the monthly, a little bit less granular. But notice how these downside targets were met. If I look at French power, the picture's not a lot different here. This was the daily chart when French power back in January 23, when French power was at 232, a target was given to 61.54. Now, and it was said that was going to take a year to happen. Took a little bit longer. We didn't quite get there, but hey, from 232 all the way to there, really hard to ignore those targets. And again, looking at these targets all the way on the downside. Now, we don't have an upside target here on the daily, so that's really quite interesting. We're not seeing that same target we saw on German power. On the 60-minute chart, again, this is EX data. If you've got OTC data, you're going to have a bit more granularity to data. We did have a little upside target there that was met, so that's where we are on French power. I'll look at the 10-minute because I know that the data is not that granular. Downside targets were met through January, February. Had this upside target given on the 27th. That was given to 76, and we've passed that. So that did work. No point in me looking at the 1 minute on that data because there's just not enough data. It's not as granular as German power. If I look at Italy, we see here, interesting, this downside target hasn't activated. Upside target on the 60-minute past, really quite key there. If I look at Nordic power, this is the cow. So again, we're seeing upside targets here, really quite interesting. And if we look at the quarterly contract, again, we're breaking higher here on the quarterly. If I want to look at targets, and I do this in the morning call, I look at this chart in the morning call, upside targets here. Notice how these targets are not being met on 2. So I can actually adjust these targets to, let's go to 1. So I'm saying here that they take 1, and you'll notice now the targets click in. So if you're trading something like Nordic power like this, then use the 1 minute target, the 1 minute charts, and that will then mean you're seeing the targets a little bit more clearly there. Looking at UK power, last of all, we do have a little upside target here as well. You can look at the forwards on that, of course. We didn't see this downside target activated, and some new upside targets kicking there on the cow. This is, again, coming off ice, so if you've got OTC data, you're going to be seeing a better picture there. These downside targets, again, given and met, and little mini upside targets. So you can use it for power, but you probably on UK power, but you want to be doing that probably on your OTC data. So coming back to the central question, have European power markets bottomed? And the answer really quite simply is short term, yes. Medium term, not clear. Long term, not yet. But the interesting thing is we've got this range. We break above 30 euros on TTF, and then we really would say we've bottomed. Hope that helps you if you're trading energy. If you want to try the targets and you want to trial, just let me know. More than happy to help you use them. As I say, more and more energy traders are adopting these targets every day, and it's really exciting to see them being used. It's just a mechanism. Remember, you can click on any chart you like. So if I open a chart of TTF and I do the 60-minute chart and I press the T key, it just puts all the trends and targets on the chart. So it's really automated, very powerful. You see I've got them set up as trackers so I can just run through. But if you want to have a go at these targets, just let me know. Send me a message on IM or email me, david@updater.co.uk, and we'll set you up with a trial. See for yourself. Use them for a few weeks and see how much they improve your trading. You can't hurt. And so I hope that helps. Bye for now.